All right, this is the Reading Room. I'm Jeff Cook. We're continuing our study into Brené Brown's Atlas of the Heart. Dr. Brown is a scholar, podcaster, best-selling author. Looking forward to diving into this first chapter, which is entitled Places We Go When Things Are Uncertain or Too Much. She's going to cover a handful of emotions in this chapter: stress, overwhelm, anxiety, worry, avoidance, excitement, dread, fear, and vulnerability. We are going to be discussing this on Tuesday nights. If you have not yet signed up for a membership or a free membership at aroundthecircle.org, that's where we're posting all of our information, all the links to our online class. Would love to have you. Go to aroundthecircle.org, sign up for a free membership. We'll be emailing you information on what we're doing, what we're up to. We would love to have you join us if you want to get into this, discussing emotions, discussing your Enneagram type number, and how they overlap with these emotions. This coming Tuesday, I decided to not do two chapters. I think we should just do this one chapter. So just the first chapter for Tuesday, the 9th of June. I'm going to start with a quote from the back. This is on page 13. This is going to release a lot of the stuff in this chapter for me, and I found quite helpful. But she says, to close this section, this is her conclusion, I want to go back to my friend and mentor, Dr. Harriet Lerner. She writes, throughout evolutionary history, anxiety and fear have helped every species to be wary and to survive. Fear can signal us to act, or alternatively, to resist the impulse to act. It can help us to make wise, self-protective choices in and out of relationships where we might otherwise sail mindlessly along, ignoring signs of trouble. And then Brown concludes, like all of the experiences in this book, both our anxiety and our fear need to be understood and respected, perhaps even befriended. We need to pull up a chair and sit with them, understand why they're showing up, and ask ourselves what there is to learn. Dismissing fear and anxiety as not useful to our quest for connection is as dangerous as choosing to live in constant fear and anxiety. For those of you who have been listening to some of our work on the morning show, we've been talking quite a bit about this, that our feelings obviously aren't always comfortable, but they might be useful. The idea that our feelings are trying to tell us something, that our feelings have data that we need to respect, that they are communicating to us, that's a hard word for me. It's something that I need to wrestle with more, and I feel like she's hitting this idea quite well in these spaces, that even those, anxiety and fear, which are so uncomfortable at times for us, need not only to be understood and respected, but even befriended. It's a hard word. Seems to me that there's a lot of wisdom there. I think there's wisdom that will carry out throughout the rest of the book. Anxiety and fear aren't the hardest emotions for me. There are other emotions that really hurt. And pausing, analyzing them, saying, what does this have to teach me at this moment, seems to me a great word when coming to the emotional life. Obviously, that's what this book is all about, is what is the rich vocabulary we can employ to talk about our inner life. And for us, as we go through this, it's going to be the overlap with our Enneagram type. So if you've just gotten into Enneagram or just getting into this book, listen for yourself. Listen to how you connect to these emotions. Listen to which ones are most powerful for you and which ones maybe are not. That will say quite a bit about you, your type, how you process the world. One of the things I really enjoy about her book, and I'll try and highlight it when it comes up, is how aware she is of how our personality interprets the world, it produces emotions, and that there's a movement there. That given our personality, certain things are elevated. Very helpful, and that's really, in my view, primary about what Enneagram is. So I'm going to jump to page 5. I'm going to start with some stress. We feel stressed when we evaluate environmental demand as beyond our ability to cope successfully. This includes elements of unpredictability, uncontrollability, and feeling overloaded. I want to pause there for a second because there's two big words here, stress and cope. So stress is not only potentially an emotion in her vocabulary. Stress is a big Enneagram category because we have a stress move. We move into our stress number. Many of you will know this, that all of the types, you see it on the Enneagram symbol, have movement, dynamic movement, and the Enneagram symbol seeks to showcase stress and security moves. So stress, having this be the first thing, the first emotion, as it were, that she's bringing up, the first experience that she's bringing up, super interesting. And she uses the word cope. Now, we use the word cope for one of the movements, which is coping style. It's another stress and coping style, in our view, go together. That we cover a lot of material in our chapter 8 of our book on coping style and how each of the types wrestle with problems before they fall into stress. So coping successfully, our experience of stress, these really go together. Lots to be said here. And perhaps when we get together Tuesday, we can go further into that. But I do like that she's bringing this up front. And again, she's going to love elevating that body, mind, and heart element of ourselves. She loves doing, in this specific quote, unpredictability. Unpredictability is about what can be predicted through your mind. Uncontrollability, it's what can be controlled physically. And feeling overloaded, we might associate that with the heart, although obviously a lot of her book is going to showcase that feelings transcend all the centers. But again, that triad just keeps popping up in her vocabulary in her book. And if you listen to my intro, you'll see where I've pointed that out in her intro. Great stuff here so far. She continues, stressful situations cause both physiological, body, and psychological, mind and emotion, reactions. There it is again. However, regardless of how strong our body responds to stress, increases in heart rate and cortisol, our emotional reaction is more tied to our cognitive assessment of whether we can cope with the situation than to how our body is reacting. I found this really interesting because I always assumed that my emotions responded to my body freaking out. But really, my emotions are responding to my thinking, assessment of how well I can handle something. This is something I pointed out in the intro, and it's super helpful. This is part of Dr. Siegel's work on Enneagram and the formation of pathways in our brains, that there's a conversation taking place between what Siegel calls the three vectors, that would be the head, heart, and body, that there is, we can think about our actions and emotions. We can feel emotionally about our thinking and our doing. And of course, when we act, it influences how we feel. More tied to how our cognitive assessment of whether we can cope with the situation than to how our body is reacting. I found this really interesting because I always assumed that my emotions responded to my body freaking out. But really, my emotions are responding to my thinking, assessment of how well I can handle something. This is something I pointed out in the intro, and it's super helpful. This is part of Dr. Siegel's work on Enneagram and the formation of pathways in our brains, that there's a conversation taking place between what Siegel calls the three vectors, that would be the head, heart, and body, that there is, we can think about our actions and emotions. We can feel emotionally about our thinking and our doing. And of course, when we act, it influences how we feel and what we do. There's always this dance taking place within us. We are a trinity, as it were. We have those three elements to our nervous system that are pretty dominant. You see this in cognitive behavioral therapy, and literally most psychological theories will want to elevate something like head, heart, body. So to Enneagram, and here she's responding to that as well. And doing a little business, our emotional reaction is more tied to our cognitive assessment. So what is it that produces emotions? It's some measure, it's a response to how we think about the world. How we think about the world is processed through our nervous system and through those vectors, through the ways that we're experiencing the world and through our motive. Lots that could be said here in terms of Enneagram. Just going to set this as a quote that's really worth sitting on. So just that relationship of thinking about your emotions and your doing, and I suppose thinking about your thinking. Feeling how your thoughts make you feel matters. How you're doing and acting in the world, how that makes you feel matters. And even feeling your feelings is a category. It's something that can happen. And then, of course, there's acting in the world. And when we act, we can think about what we're doing. We can feel about things about what we're doing. And I suppose it's the case we can have intuitions about what we're doing. And so those three vectors, always in a dance, really worth naming. It's going to come up probably a handful of times as we go through this book. So, page 7. Feeling stressed and feeling overwhelmed seem to be related to our perception of how we are coping with our current situation and our ability to handle the accompanying emotions. Am I coping? Can I handle this? Am I inching toward the quicksand? This is verifying. I mean, her language is nearly identical to ours in terms of how coping style works. So if you get into this, again, coping style is one of the sets of triads, one of the ways that you can break up the 9 numbers into 3 different triads. Coping style is about how we solve problems. 1s, 3s, 5s act on their thinking to solve problems. 2s, 7s, and 9s are positive outlook. 4, 6s, and 8s all take a posture where they want to get an emotional response from others when solving problems. Coping with your present situation, she says, is how we are dealing with stress. And that seems right. What stress, in my view, would be something like stress occurs when you're not getting your motive fulfilled. So Enneagram names your motive. When you're not getting your motive fulfilled, you feel the fact that the primary thing that you want and need in order to feel good in the world isn't there. That moves you into your coping style. You start trying to solve the problem. When your coping style doesn't work, you fall into your stress number, or you employ your stress number to try and take a different vantage for attacking that. Again, this is all in chapter 8 of our book, but her language, again, nearly identical to what I want to say. And so we're on the same page here. My 4th quote, page 7. When I read that Kabat-Zinn suggests that mindful play or no agenda, non-doing time, is the cure for overwhelm. Overwhelm is where like you can't respond to the world anymore. She was listing this. Well, I'll just quote her. Her overwhelmed means an extreme level of stress and emotional and or cognitive intensity to the point of feeling unable to function. That's her definition for this second emotion that she's covering. I found this interesting that she says the cure for overwhelm is no agenda, non-doing time. This made sense to me. Why, when we were overwhelmed in her restaurant work, we weren't asked to help problem solve the situation. We were just asked to engage in non-doing. I'm sure experience taught the manager that doing nothing was the only way back for someone totally overwhelmed. I'm really curious to talk about this on Tuesday, this whole section of being overwhelmed and the solution being non-doing. Many of you will see, if you're familiar with Enneagram, that's really going to work for a couple of the numbers, 8s, 3s, and 1s in particular. Move into numbers in their stress move in which they shut down doing. 8s move to 5, 1s move to 4, 3s move to 9. That is non-doing. If it's the case, and a handful of you responded that Brown has typed herself as an Enneagram 1. So let's just go there for a second. Let's say she is an Enneagram 1. This would make a whole lot of sense. Like I need to get off stage. I need to quit trying to execute my will and move into a space of quiet non-doing as the solution to feeling overwhelmed, because in her center, if she's a 1, she's doing, and apparently hitting a spot where she's not getting her motive fulfilled, so needs to stop. I'd be really curious if this worked for all the types. For example, for withdrawn types, for 4s, 5s, and 9s who are action repressed, is more non-doing going to be the solution to your problem? I bet you it's not. 9s and 4s move into more of that earning space. 4s move into 2, 9s move into 6. They kind of employ their body. So at times they may feel overwhelmed by something different. 5s may feel overwhelmed by something different. When 5s get stressed, they moved into the 7 space, and it may cause a lot more action to take place. Be real interested in talking about that on Tuesday. My 5th quote. So I'm doing 15 quotes, by the way, from each of the chapters. She writes, this is at the bottom of 7, this is not a setup for successful decision making. The big learning here is that both stressed and overwhelmed is about our narrative of emotional and mental depletion. There's just too much going on to manage effectively. I only mention this not because of stressed and overwhelmed. I mention it because of her use of narrative. The big learning here is that stress, overwhelm, perhaps any feeling that is going to get mentioned in this book, is about our narrative of emotional and mental work. Here it's depletion. I like that. Again, narrative is a way of thinking of yourself in story terms, perhaps. It's naming how you come to the world, what the values you have are, what the biases you have are. And in Enneagram term, it's just naming your motive and how you perceive yourself. That's going to affect so much of your emotions. Had a conversation with TJ probably a year ago in which he was recounting a conversation he had with his sister, in which he said this event in his past that had to do with his parents, where she was present. He said this meant a ton to me, my trajectory, and all that I've become as a man in the future. And his sister couldn't remember the event. For some of us, some things ping with severe value and weight. And there can be another person who is close to us, loves us, in the same room, experiencing the same thing, and it's just another day. And that matters. Narrative here matters. The story that we're in interprets our emotions. I think that's helpful. Quote 6 from me. It's at the bottom of 9. The American Psychological Association defines anxiety. We're going to move into anxiety as a feeling now. That's the third of the feelings. The American Psychological Association defines anxiety as an emotion characterized by feelings of tension, worried thoughts, and physical changes like increased blood pressure. Friends, notice a scientific institution like the American Philosophical Association is dividing the human person into 3 again. And you see it here. Feelings of tension, worried thoughts, physical changes. Bang, bang, bang. It seems we have uniformity of opinion on this front. I don't mean to keep hammering it, but because there often is a lot of skepticism. To Enneagram's just a language, and it's employing a lot of categories that are assumed, but are likewise assumed by all the scientists. And so bringing in some more tools, perspective to what is clearly there in the minds of many who study this for a living, it's just really valuable. So I just want to note that the American Psychological Association is going down these paths as well. It's not just Brené Brown. It's not just the Enneagram nerds. Quote continues, anxiety can be both a state and a trait. This is an interesting little distinction made. Anxiety can be both a state and a trait. To better understand this, let's get clear on what these terms mean. Best explanation I heard comes from the Oxford Review Encyclopedia of Terms. Traits. A trait is considered to be something that is part of an individual's personality and therefore a long-term characteristic of an individual that shows through their behavior, action, and feeling. Some of the things where Enneagram gets the most pushback is that you can't change your number. Friends, the Oxford Review Encyclopedia of Terms, let's assume that the folks at Oxford are at least informed. When describing personality traits, describe them as long-term characteristics of an individual, and that they include and are shown through their behavior, actions, and feelings. Again, just want to point out the verification, scientific verification of what Enneagram's been saying for quite a while. A state, so a trait and a state. This is versus states. A state, on the other hand, is a contemporary condition that they are experiencing for a short period of time. After the state has passed, they will return to another condition. For example, someone who says, I'm feeling quite confident about this interview, or I feel nervous about doing this, is describing states. Helpful in terms of coming to anxiety. Some experience anxiety as a trait, some as a temporary state. I think that's interesting. Quote 8 for me, top of page 11. An intolerance for uncertainty is an important contributing factor to all types of anxiety. Those of us who are generally uncomfortable with uncertainty are more likely to experience anxiety in specific situations, as well as to have trait anxiety and anxiety disorder. Our anxiety often leads to one of two coping mechanisms: worry or avoidance. Those, by the way, are not coping styles. But we'll talk about these. Well, maybe they are. I need to think on that. Just a sec. Unfortunately, neither of these coping strategies is very effective. Worrying and anxiety go together, but worry is not an emotion. It's the thinking part of anxiety. Worry is described as a chain of negative thoughts about bad things that might happen in the future. Tons to say going on here in terms of Enneagram, specifically with head types. But let me again say that when we get together to talk on Tuesday, let's talk across types, not just 5, 6s, and 7s who are the head triad, but let's talk about all of us and all of our relationship with fear, anxiety, and the rest here. What's interesting is, again, she's typing as 1, so let's just say that she's 1. For those of us who are generally uncomfortable with uncertainty, we are more likely to experience anxiety in specific situations, as well as to have trait anxiety. Trait being long-term. This is part of your personality. Lots to say here, because again, you'll notice the thinking and anxiety are paired. That's going to be a big part of Dr. Siegel's work. That's going to be a big part of Enneagram, that when you take in the world primarily through your head, what ends up happening is you are finding your grounding through what you can think about, through certainty. And when you don't get the certainty that your head craves, it produces this emotion. And the emotion is anxiety. I like the distinction here that worry is not an emotion. And so we need to talk about that. What is worry? She says it's the thinking part of anxiety. So a big element of her work is going to be as a lexicographer. Actually, she says it at the bottom here. I'm just going to skip ahead. She says the entire premise of this book is that language has the power to define our experiences. Her work here is to get the language down, systematized, working. Many of you know that's, and maybe this is, again, validation of the oneness. That's what I feel like my job is in Enneagram world, is let's look at all the terms. Let's kind of focus them, get a rich vocabulary working that we can all kind of employ and say this is really where we should probably land when talking about experiences and terms. But here, worry is the thinking part of anxiety. Worth wrestling there. So it's not just like her list isn't just emotions. I think she wanted to call them experiences. So to go there then, if worry is not an emotion, it's the thinking part of anxiety. You have your emotional life, and then you can think about your emotional life. And when you are thinking about your emotional life, you can put terms on what is getting kicked out in the thinking process and what your experience of that is. And so worry would be a thinking, what the fruit of your thinking about certain topics. I think that's interesting. I think that's worth discussing. It's worth categorizing. Where does that help it happen elsewhere? Can you make a list of this is the thinking part of your anger? This is the thinking part of your shame? Because this is the thinking part of your anxiety. And so we could probably, divide some of that up and perhaps categorize some terms on that front. I think that's interesting. 9. What really got me about the worry research is that those of us with a tendency to worry believe it is helpful for coping. It's not. Believe it is uncontrollable, which means we don't try to stop worrying and try to suppress worry thoughts, which actually strengthens and reinforces worrying. Again, notice the triad. I'm not suggesting that we worry about worry, but it's helpful to recognize that worrying is not a helpful coping mechanism, that we absolutely can learn how to control it, and that rather than suppressing worry, we need to dig into it and address the emotion driving the thinking. The emotion is communicating information to you. What is the emotion trying to tell you? We need to dig into and address the emotion that's driving this thinking. One thing I would love to note here is the idea of worrying about worrying, because all of the centers can experience this. You can become angry at how angry you're becoming. You can be ashamed at the shame you're experiencing, and here you can worry about worry. So there's like a doom loop that can occur with a lot of our emotions, especially some of these negative emotions, especially when we're like doing inward work. And that's just worth naming, especially worth naming for types like 4s and for types like 1s. And I imagine for types like 6s. I'm not sure that 7s would have this problem. So I'm kind of anchoring 7s or 6s as the ones who might be most inclined to worry about their worrying. 1s, clearly the ones most, well, 1s and 9s might both really become angry at their anger. And we'll have to talk about shame. 2s, 3s, and 4s, you'll have to speak up on your experience of being ashamed of your shame and how that might function. I find that interesting. I find a lot of this stuff interesting. Quote 10. This is all from page 11, which I'm essentially reading down all of 11, which I found fantastic. Avoidance, she writes, is the second coping strategy for anxiety. Avoidance might be stated as positive spin. And I'm associating, this whole paragraph struck me as very 7-ish. And I just want to name that as, I feel like there's just a ton of 7 that comes in here. And again, I wanted to if I was talking to Brown, I'd really want to ask her some 7 questions just to see if some of that hit for her. But she says, avoidance, the second coping strategy for anxiety, is not showing up and often spending a lot of energy zigzagging around and away from that thing that already feels like it's consuming us. And avoidance isn't benign. It can hurt us, hurt other people, and lead to increased and mounting anxiety. It just feels like she's real familiar with this. And I think that's interesting. She quotes a author, Dr. Harriet Lerner, in her book, The Dance of Fear. It is not fear that stops you from doing the brave and true thing in your daily life. Rather, the problem is avoidance. You want to feel comfortable, so you avoid doing or saying the thing that will evoke fear and other difficult emotions. Avoidance will make you feel less vulnerable in the short run, but it will never make you less afraid. I think that's valuable. And again, I feel like that's great advice for some of the types. For some of us, I don't think that's going to ping very hard, but I think for some of us it will, and that's just worth naming. It's worth naming that's going to ping hard. So my 12th quote, skipping 11 because I already did it. My 12th quote is about fear as a present emotion. This was lexicographer. This is lexicographical work. This is, she's trying to define some words. Yep. Fear as a present emotion is something we need to talk about Tuesday. She writes, for anxiety and dread, the threat is in the future. For fear, the threat is now, in the present. Fear is a negative, short-lasting, high-alert emotion in response to a perceived threat. And like anxiety, it can be measured as a state. Some people have a higher propensity to experience fear than others. Fear arises when we need to respond quickly to physical or psychological danger that is present and imminent, because fear is a rapid-fire emotion. The physiological reaction can sometimes occur before we even realize we're afraid. The typical responses are fight, flight, or freeze. I found this challenging because I routinely talk about fear as a future emotion. I think that this is interesting, and so it can be redefined in the way that she is, that fear is much more about that high alert state, whereas anxiety, dread, These are more the emotions that are future oriented. And so she hasn't gotten much into the temporal side of emotions, but she is here, obviously. And that would be real helpful to just say, what's the future? I'm envisioning something in the future and it's coming into my present. Or I suppose it's the case, Kristen Message said this in one of our last conversations on Morning Show, that all emotions are present. And so at some level, it's the object of your thinking, feeling, and intuitions that are temporal in nature. But all the feelings that we experience about them are right here, right now. So something I need to wrestle with. I don't have clear thoughts on this. And again, this is why I'm doing the book. This is not my specialty at all, just in case you guys didn't know this. I am coming to this as a philosopher, and I am coming to this as somebody who's Enneagram informed, and I am coming to this as somebody who's going to drown real quick in the vocabulary and not be able to make the distinctions I probably want to as fast as I want to. But such is life. That's what I'm learning on the spot, and that's why I'm doing this study. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Speaking of TED Talks, vulnerability is next. It's my 13th quote on page 13. This is really interesting. I loved this. Vulnerability is the emotion that we experience during times of uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. Through our research and training, we've asked tens of thousands of people to give us examples of vulnerability from their lives. These are a few of the answers that directly pierce the emotions. I found these cutting. Vulnerability is associated with the first date after my divorce, talking about race with my team, trying to get pregnant after my second miscarriage, talking about my feelings, starting my own business, watching my children leave for college. If any of you listened to my first few conversations with Katie Whitlock were about generations and about gender, and I was so uncomfortable. And it's because this is a place I feel exposed, ignorant, and given our culture, I'm an affluent white guy and have a lot of personal privilege. This is known. Speaking into those spaces and trying to find wisdom for myself and others was really tricky for me, just to name it. And I think that's a good thing. What's the emotion telling you? What's the emotion telling you about the world? Quote 14, this is on page 14. While these are uncomfortable and difficult experiences, there is no evidence that they are indicators of weakness. This is helpful. In fact, this is one of the biggest myths about vulnerability. We've found that across cultures, most of us were raised to believe that being vulnerable is being weak. This sets up an unresolvable tension for most of us because we were also raised to be brave. There is no courage, however, without vulnerability. Courage requires the willingness to lean into uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. Weakness, bravery, courage, vulnerability. Part of me, I could see the connection kind of between vulnerability and the head triad. But when she brought in courage, there it is. Courage in the face of anxiety. Courage is a virtue. It's a muscle. It's a human excellence that can get built up and employed. And human excellences, by their nature, are strengths. In fact, the word virtue comes from the Latin for strength. Being vulnerable and being weak is, I think she's right in saying this is something that our society can communicate, or maybe we just intuitively, because vulnerability just hits us as feeling weak in the moment. But recharacterizing it and saying it's a measure of courage, I think is mentally helpful. That's a better way to interpret what's going on with vulnerability. Some of you who are longtime listeners will know that I'm trying to myself enter these spaces. Really uncomfortable for me, especially because a lot of my personal thoughts are going out to thousands of people. No pressure. Let's talk about your dad. This ends up being tricky. I have a hard time, to be honest. I have a hard time in seeing it as a strength. I understand what's said here, that this is a strength. I have a hard time internalizing it as a strength. Vulnerability feels like I'm simply oversharing about my personal issues, flaws, ineptitudes. Words like hers, I think, are incredibly valuable for folks like me. And I'm not going to just say, oh yeah, Brené Brown said it. I'm there. I'm with her. I'm jumping in. This is something I will self-consciously continue to struggle with, but appreciate the cheers from the sideline, as it were, as I'm on the playing field. Last quote for me, page 15. In a world where perfectionism, pleasing, and proving are used as armor to protect our egos and our feelings. I never do that, by the way. Perfectionism, pleasing, proving. This is not armor. I've never experienced this. This is actually the most one sentence that I've heard her say yet. So it takes a lot of courage to show up and be all in when we can't control the outcome. That's a big part of vulnerability. You can't control the outcome, at least for me. And notice control is all over that. I'm a body type. There you go. It also takes discipline and self-awareness to understand what to share and with whom. Again, very one-ish paragraph here, because ones, twos, and sixes can have that oversharing external energy going outward. Vulnerability is not oversharing. It's sharing with people who have earned the right to hear our stories and our experiences. That's wisdom. Can't be open with everybody. Unless you got a podcast going out to thousands of people, and then it's okay. Vulnerability is not oversharing. It's sharing with people who have earned the right to hear our stories and experiences. That's actually a great distinction between, like, if you are sharing with somebody who loves you, is cheering for you, wants the best for you, there's not a category of oversharing. That's what's going on there, right? You are elevating things that matter to you in your heart, mind, behavior, past, and saying this has weight, but doing so with people who love, care, and cheer for you. That seems really helpful to me, because I will use the phrase oversharing all the time about myself. So she closes, vulnerability is not weakness. It's our greatest measure of courage. That's the end of the chapter. Well, we're diving into, if you haven't gotten a chance to purchase the book, Atlas of the Heart. It was published 4 years ago. I imagine you might find an affordable copy online that's used, but I'm sure you can pick it up new. I'm sure you can pick up the audio. But what I'm really sure of is that we're going to be meeting on Tuesdays throughout the summer to discuss this book, and I would love to have you. Go to aroundthecircle.org, sign up for a free membership. You're going to end up getting emails from us that just send out online Zoom links. We want to know you. We want to meet you. You should expect 10 to 30 people to show up to talk about the book. You do not have to participate if you don't want to. You can just be there and listen. You can. There's a handful of folks who sign in and don't even turn on their camera. They just listen as they're doing other stuff. That's entirely fine. And then there's some folks who are ready to go, and they're like, this is what I want to talk about now with people who are informed. And across the board, if any of this is you, sign up for a membership, join us on our Zoom call. We begin at 4:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 7:30 Eastern on Tuesdays. Our next one, time of this recording, is on June 9th, but you can find us, I'm sure, if you're down the timeline. If you got into this late, we'd love to have you. And that's pretty much what I got. Friends, we're doing another book. It's going to be a good time. Big adventure. Appreciate the hell out of you. May all good things be yours.